In business today, three things to know. First, stolen secrets. The U.S. accuses top Chinese officials of hacking American companies. Experts say this may do little to slow down Chinese theft. Then, it's a deal. AT&T plans a $49 billion takeover of DirecTV. Who at the subscription television party may hook up next? And marketers target the fastest growing demographic in the U.S. How major brands are diversifying their images. Arise Exchange starts now. Hello, everyone. I'm Andrew Schmertz. The United States has backed up tough words about cyber spying with indictments of 5 high-level Chinese military officials on Monday. Prosecutors claim the Chinese targeted companies in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, trying to steal corporate secrets from several companies, including Alcoa, United States Steel, Westinghouse, and Allegheny. Some of these secrets involve national security in the past, since the Chinese have been accused of hacking into blueprints for power plants and other sensitive areas. U.S. Attorney General Erich announced the indictments.
They stole trade secrets that would have been particularly beneficial to Chinese companies at the time that they were stolen. In others, they stole sensitive internal communications that would provide a competitor or an adversary in litigation with insight into the strategy and the vulnerabilities of the American entity. In some, the alleged hacking appears to have been conducted for no other reason than to advantage state-owned companies and other interests in China at the expense of businesses here in the United States.
Cybersecurity expert Scott Schober joins us now with more. Welcome back to Arise Exchange, Scott. Thanks for stopping by. I know you've been talking about this all day. Yes. First, what secrets did the Chinese want here? They're not stealing cookie recipes.
No, not by any means. And this is a little bit different than the traditional national security. This is really more of an economic espionage, where they're looking for specific things toward targeted companies, in this case in Pittsburgh, PA there, where they could gain insight into economic advantages. And that's what they're targeting.
The Chinese have for some time now been accused of hacking into U.S. companies and their computers. They continuously deny it. This seems to be a regime with a bit of chutzpah, if you will, because this is a huge program, according to U.S. authorities, backed by the Chinese military.
Yeah, this is really huge, and in fact, they've identified a lot of this communication, where all this is going on, in several buildings throughout Shanghai. There's a lot of emails that in particular were hacked to get content so they could gain economic advantage in this particular case here. But it's been going on for a number of years now, and they've been monitoring it very closely, and they're finally moving in and catching specifics.
Okay, so they've indicted 5 high-level military officials. How significant are these indictments when the fact is they're never going to really prosecute these guys? And there's 5 of how many?
Yeah, you make a good point. Obviously, there's a lot more individuals than just this core 5. This is a large number that's really behind this hacking regime here. But more importantly, it sets a precedent, and that's what the important thing. This is really the first time, so it's kind of groundbreaking that the federal prosecutors are going after these individuals and saying, enough is enough here. We're not going to put up with it anymore. We're going to actually go after and prosecute these individuals.
Prosecution is one thing, but what else can the United States be doing? There's got to be some economic pressure that they could put on China.
Sure, and that's where it's a real tough territory. They don't want to mess up any type of trade agreements or things like that, or cause economic turmoil, and that could be catastrophic to different economies, especially the U.S. economy right here. So they're trying to do this carefully, but yet set a line in the sand, as it were, to say enough is enough. We're not going to put up with it anymore.
Do you believe the Chinese government on the top levels believes it knows what's going on here? Or
oh, absolutely.
There's no question about it?
Absolutely. They know what's going on.
And
clearly.
They sanction it and they say go for it. Yep. What can U.S. companies do to protect themselves?
Yeah, that's a good point. On a smaller scale, obviously, you want to take all the precautions you can. You can't just count on the old traditional virus protection software. That doesn't work anymore these days. But anything that's sensitive, you want to be careful what you put it into, be it an email or other documentations. If it's digital, where does that reside? So you want to make sure that you shred it. Don't keep copies of it laying around. Look at your employees. Make sure that they're trusted employees, that the information doesn't get out of the facility, be it a laptop, a mobile phone, or any of the type of things like that.
Can we draw a straight line from a product that a company here has in the United States to a similar product or similar design or patented technique or something that shows up in China that clearly was stolen?
It happens all the time. It happened to our company even, in fact. And I was amazed. We saw it about a year later. There was a number of instruments we sold to China a similar instrument appeared. In fact, one of the typos in one of the software screens, they copied it exactly the same. So it tells us they're not even that clear on copying.
As you mentioned, this one involved economic espionage.
Economic, yes.
However, the New York Times did a story about a year ago that had a pretty extensive national security threat to it, that they're looking for plans for power plants, for et cetera.
Yeah, and that's
what
where...
would they do with that information?
Well, that's where it's scary, because you don't know where it ends up. Anything where it's critical infrastructure, you got to be careful. Power plants, or maybe even more nuclear plants. If they have more idea of what's going on there, it gets in the hands of China or even other nations. It could be catastrophic as far as national security. So that's where the U.S. gets very nervous. Department of Defense or Department of Justice, and certainly FBI. They move in quickly, and that's where they want to stop that.
Okay, Scott Schober, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on.
To the markets right now, choppy trading on Wall Street for the day. Let's take a look at the closing numbers. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing up 20 points to 16,511. The S&P 500 edging higher to 1885. And the NASDAQ up 35 and change to 4125. Some of the top stocks we're watching today. Investment bank Credit Suisse agreed to a plea deal with U.S. authorities over criminal charges involving helping Americans evade taxes. Under the settlement, the bank is expected to pay about $2.5 billion in fines. Credit Suisse closing down 28 cents. Campbell's Soup lowered its fiscal 2014 sales guidance after saying its third quarter revenue fell below expectations. The company reported earnings of $184 million, or 58 cents a share. Campbell's down $1.06. And it's going to cost a lot more to visit the happiest place on earth, Disneyland in California. The price of a single-day ticket for park goers 10 and up will go up to $96. That's up from $92. Disney closing up 66 cents. And looking at commodities, gold pulling back a dime, and oil to 102.64. Last week, we saw increases in the Producer Price Index, or PPI, a sign of inflation. Our next guest doesn't necessarily think so. Sam Stovall is Chief Equity Strategist with S&P Capital IQ, and he's joining us today from S&P Studios. Sam, welcome back to Arise Exchange, as always.
Good to talk to you, Andrew.
You have a different name for the PPI. What is it?
A preoccupation, or a premature preoccupation with inflation, PPI. Basically, I think that investors might be getting a little bit worried over nothing because, yes, we saw a bit of a pickup in the PPI, the Producer Price Index, and CPI, but I think it's going to take a long way before we really start to cause the Fed to worry and to accelerate their tapering timetable as well as their tightening timetable, which I still think is going to take place no earlier than the second quarter of 2015.
Sam, where do you peg inflation right now? And the question is how much inflation does the Fed want to see?
Well, right now, if you look to the headline Consumer Price Index, it gained 2% year over year. The core rate was up about 1.9%, so a little bit less. But the number that the Fed really looks at, the PCE, Personal Consumption Expenditure, most recently showed only a 1.2% increase. The big difference being in how the CPI and the PCE looks at housing costs. But I think the Fed is going to be focusing on the PCE, and I think that they're going to be waiting to see what kind of growth is likely to occur. And quite frankly, I think they would like to see that number edge closer to their target of 2%.
Sam, there's a whole bunch of people out there, though, that have a dissenting view that say that inflation is far worse than it is, that the Fed is able to look at any of these basket of numbers, the CPI, the PPI, the other number you just mentioned there, and come up with a formula that it wants to see. Americans will tell you that it feels like inflation is out there.
Oh, sure. And actually, if you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there is a white paper out there that discusses this very issue, where, does the CPI accurately measure inflation in the U.S.? I think one reason is that people like to point to at least something in their life that's a lot higher than the overall rate of inflation. But what the CPI tries to do is basically say, if the U.S. were one consumer and they had items in their shopping basket, how much would the increase in that basket cost be? They forget, however, that as things improve, whether it's electronics or automobiles, that actually results in a lower price unless there is a commensurate price increase in the product.
Isn't the best number to look at in many ways wages and wage inflation? And maybe we do want to see people earning a little bit more money that ultimately translates into higher inflation?
Well, I think that wage inflation is a very good point, that unless we start getting a lot of that, we're really not going to be seeing the PCE moved dramatically higher, there aren't a lot of people out there who are willing to barge into their boss's office and say, give me a raise or I'm out of here.
All right, let's turn to the markets for a moment. We've talked last week a little bit with some people about whether we're starting to creep into a time of bear market. Now, we have a long way to go before our bear market territory. We're not even in a correction necessarily. Is there a risk of that this year?
Oh, I think that there's a risk of a correction, 10 to 20% decline, but I'm not really of the mindset that we're heading for a new bear market. We've gone 31 months without a decline of 10% or more, and the median since World War II is 12 months. So basically, yeah, it's been a long time since we've had one. We're in the very vulnerable sell in May period, or May through October, especially in midterm election years, the only 6-month period of the entire 16-quarter presidential cycle in which we have seen an average decline.
And we do have to caution that you start to see volume fall off in the summer because everybody is spending the summer in the Hamptons, and that could have an over effect on the markets as some selling pressure hits.
That's right. While I'm still waiting for my invitation from you for the Hamptons, yes, investors focus more on their TANs and their portfolios, but also I think it's a lack of capital inflows. You don't have 401ks or IRAs being maxed out. Pension funds typically add early in the year, et cetera. So it's a combination of vacation and capital inflows.
Okay, Sam Stovall, always fun. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Coming up, a marriage made in space. AT&T gobbles up satellite provider DirecTV. Who is next for a tie-up, and what does it mean for you, the viewers? You're watching Arise Exchange.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms, just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
The ink isn't dry on the proposed merger between Comcast and Time Warner Cable, and there is already another mega deal that will redefine the landscape of pay television. AT&T announcing Monday that it will acquire satellite broadcaster DirecTV for $49 billion. AT&T only has 6 million cable subscribers, but combined with DirecTV's 20 million subscribers, the company would be the #2 pay TV service in the U.S. At stake, the future of not just subscription television, but broadband service as well. Paul Gallant is with Guggenheim Partners, and he joins us now on the phone. Paul, thank you for spending a few minutes with us.
Absolutely, Andrew. Thanks.
It appears that for both of these companies in this space, they sort of had dwindling prospects, certainly DirecTV. Would you say that's true? And what do the two companies then get by combining?
Well, I think DirecTV obviously lacks the one thing that all telecom media companies need in the future, and that is obviously broadband. They have a fantastic pay TV satellite system, but no broadband. And so I think long-term they were really on the wrong side of history. So linking up with AT&T, I think that's a perfect complement in that sense. AT&T has a terrific broadband network, both wired and wireless.
Well, and the trouble for DirecTV, of course, is because it's satellite-based, it really had no way to facilitate broadband service.
Right. And so I think the hope here is that what AT&T is going to argue to the FCC and the Justice Department in the U.S. is that putting these two strong sets of assets together under one roof will help AT&T attack what AT&T hopes is the real enemy, which is the cable companies. Cable still has 50 to 60% market share in most markets. So I think AT&T believes putting together their wireless network and their landline network with DirecTV's excellent satellite network together will be enough to really take some market share from cable.
I'll ask you about the regulations and the regulatory impact in a moment, but the player left out of this, of course, is Dish TV, and there's some Monday morning quarterbacking going on as to why AT&T did not do a deal with Dish when Dish holds a whole bunch more wireless licenses.
Yeah, it's not really clear, and that's really a big question on Wall Street today. Dish has more options, I think, than DirecTV had to start with because it does have wireless spectrum, which DirecTV does not have. So Dish has an opportunity to build out its own wireless broadband network, but I think investors probably would have preferred to see AT&T go after Dish because of Dish's spectrum. But for whatever reason, AT&T didn't choose that path.
Okay, let's talk about regulatory issues here and whether this deal will get approved. Where does this put the Justice Department at the moment? In sort of a box, doesn't it? Because it's got to deal with Comcast and Time Warner and AT&T and DirecTV. Does it look at this as a holistic deal with the two of them now, or is it going to look at them both on their merits?
Yeah, that's an important question. I think technically they're supposed to look at them separately, but both of them together are such game-changing proposed mergers that I strongly suspect both agencies will look at them together and decide, is this together, are these a good thing for consumers or not? Because they really change the landscape. The core thing that they do is they consolidate the distribution side of the pay TV business, and regulators are going to say, is that basically good or not good for consumers?
The Comcast argument, of course, is that Comcast and Time Warner doesn't compete necessarily in the same markets. That's not the case here with AT&T and DirecTV.
Right. I mean, AT&T and DirecTV do trip an important antitrust wire, which is AT&T is buying one of its direct competitors. And according to the Justice Department, the pay TV business is already, quote, highly concentrated. So this merger would further concentrate that. So I think it definitely raises some red flags in the Justice Department. My view, I think it's going to get through in the end. My guess is what the Justice Department is going to say is, we don't love the pay TV concentration, but we think putting DirecTV's assets and their buying power for programming in the hands of AT&T is going to make AT&T a much stronger competitor to the cable companies.
Is one bigger obstacle here not the DOJ, the Department of Justice, but the NFL, the National Football League? Because from what we understand, DirecTV re-upping its deal with the NFL is key to this deal going through.
Right, very interesting clause. AT&T clearly values the NFL deal very highly because they basically gave themselves a walk-away opportunity if they can't get the deal re-upped with the NFL. So I think it's a fascinating sort of sidelight to this merger is, does the NFL care about this merger? Because it seems to me like they could blow it up if they want to.
Okay, Paul Gallant, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Time now for our business ticker stories making news around the world. Ousted New York Times executive editor Jill Abramson delivered her first public comment since the Gray Lady booted her last week. Monday, she delivered the commencement address at Wake Forest University. In her speech, she spoke of resilience and referenced the challenges she recently faced.
Sure, losing a job you love hurts. But the work I revere, journalism that holds powerful institutions and people accountable, this is the work I will remain very much a part of. What's next for me? I don't know. So I'm in exactly the same boat as many of you.
Everyone there out of a job. Abramson gave no further clues about the events from last week. Reports say she was fired after complaining about unequal pay between her and former editors. The paper, however, says she was just a terrible manager. More signs the price of your morning cup of joe is going up. A highly contagious fungus has caused more than $1 billion of damage to coffee plants across Central America. The disease, known as coffee rust, is wiping out crops across the region and is especially deadly to the Arabica coffee, the bean that makes up most high-end specialty coffees. Today, the U.S. government stepped in by supporting a $5 million partnership with Texas A&M University's World Coffee Research Center to try and eliminate the fungus. British drug giant AstraZeneca has rejected Pfizer's latest and what it describes as its final bid to create the world's largest pharmaceutical company. The offer was worth about $119 billion. AstraZeneca responded that the increased bid still undervalues the company. Pfizer, which is the world's second largest drug maker by revenue, has been courting AstraZeneca since January, arguing their businesses are complementary. And it turns out California Chrome will still have a chance to become the first Triple Crown winner in 36 years. New York regulators have decided that the racehorse can now wear his nasal strip in the 146 Belmont Stakes on June 7th. A day earlier, California Chrome's trainer said that if the horse wasn't allowed to run with the nasal strip, his owners might not want to run him at all in the Belmont. Chrome first won the Kentucky Derby and then the Preakness, two of the three Triple Crown legs. The colt was bred for just $10,000. So far, he has earned the prize he's earned with the owners is well over $2 million. Ahead, rip a lot of people off, then make millions in book and speaking engagements. Our favorite person of the day is next here on Arise Exchange.
Here at Arise America, we want to bring you news from a different perspective, and not just news, but analysis as well. Tell me what it was like growing up gay in Uganda.
I have suffered sexual violence, including that has been planned by my family to heal me from lesbianism.
To have somebody lead your child away in handcuffs is just not something that should be done to a 12-year-old child.
You call this Victims Advocate Group, this phone number, which is sponsored by the Catholic Church, correct?
Right.
And what kind of response did you get?
They told me not to make prank calls and it wasn't appropriate and hung up the phone.
My God. Michael Dunn could go away for many decades. Is that enough for you?
No, it's not. The person that killed Jordan Davis has to be found guilty by a court of law in the United States of America.
Time now for our favorite person of the day, when we pick one person who grabbed our attention and not for the right reasons. Today, it is the real Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, who says he expects to make $100 million this year from speaking tours, even though the people he ripped off say he still owes them tens of millions. Belfort is the author of the best-selling true story, Wolf of Wall Street, where he chronicles years of boozing, womanizing, and stealing money from investors of bogus penny stock companies he was promoting. The book was turned into a hit movie with Leonardo DiCaprio playing him. He served 22 months in prison and agreed to pay back the $110 million he stole from unwitting investors. But prosecutors and victims say he has a long way to go in paying that money back. When Belfort was asked about the money on Australian television, he walked off the program.
The last thing is that apparently you have an oral contract with your management, the Fordham Company. Is that an attempt to hide your income?
Next question.
I think the peanut gallery is going to start chiming in really quickly.
He's such a believable guy. Next question. Let's all try that. He eventually, by the way, sat back down. Belfort claims that he will make good on the money through his speaking engagements, but many have his doubts. So crime may not pay, but writing and speaking about it clearly does. And so Jordan Belfort is our favorite person of the day. Next, is targeting a specific demographic group good for marketers? You're watching Arise Exchange on this Monday. Please stay with us.
If I was building my own news network, I think I'd want broad, in-depth knowledge of important issues throughout the world.
I would want to recruit a fairly diverse staff that had different life experiences before they came to news.
We want to see how we can help ourselves and help benefit other people, and not just see what's up with the celebrities and where they're going and traveling and buying this and buying that.
If I were to build my own news network, it would certainly have to reflect a diversity of culture, because that's the global situation, that's the global reality.
I would probably bring a lot of personal stories, really personal stories from the leaders of all countries.
If I was to build my own news network, I would just have people from all over who are very connected and diverse.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms, just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs, or they got pregnant at an early age. And I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Experts say the Latino market represents the fastest growing demographic in the United States, with more than 56 million calling America home. And companies are tapping into their spending power by creating products designed specifically with those interests and needs in mind. Last week, the cellular giant T-Mobile said it's teaming up with Univision, the Spanish-language cable television broadcast operator, to create a new wireless brand specialty for Latino customers, a trend analysts say isn't going away anytime soon. Erich Joachimsthaler is founder and CEO of Vivaldi Partners. Welcome back to Arise Exchange, Erich.
Thank you.
So let's just first talk about what T-Mobile and Univision are doing here. Sort of two companies in different industries, it would seem. Univision is a broadcaster and T-Mobile is a cell phone provider, a wireless provider. What's going on here and why are they specifically targeting Latinos?
Both of them target very much the same customer, if you will, the Hispanic customer. And so it's a perfect union, if you will, creating a new value proposition that is more powerful than just merely offering their individual products to them.
Latinos are the fastest growing segment of the United States as far as buying power goes. The question I have then is, how do you target them differently than you target other groups?
Today we have so many different ways of targeting that goes beyond just massive marketing. It goes through specific targeted marketing, location-based marketing. We can discern how these consumers shop, and from their shopping behavior on their mobile phones, we can identify those and then target them very specifically.
And do you find groups from different demographics shop differently?
Yes, absolutely.
So how so?
So we track, for example, block-wise mobile phones. We can target. We know where certain people live, where that mobile phone lives, where that mobile phone works, if you will, and can identify there very precisely a particular Hispanic customer or other segment.
What are the dangers, though, when a chief marketing officer sits around the boardroom or something, or with his staff, and says, "I want to target a specific demographic group"? Because it's such a large population. It seems like putting everybody in the same basket is not necessarily efficient or effective.
This is the biggest problem in targeting the Hispanic market, because the Hispanic market is many different cultures. It is more diverse than the average American consumer, if you will.
And not just diverse geography-wise, but certainly geography from where they come from. But I imagine across the economic spectrum, their interests, their political beliefs.
To the extent to which they are sort of part of the American mainstream, to the extent they separate themselves in somewhat within their particular cultures. So yes, the answer is there is a very large differences, and you cannot target them uniformly with one approach. This has been the failure in the past.
And so have companies become more successful then in that approach? Because we still have this sort of glass ceiling, if you will, in the marketing officer. The marketing officer in this country is still a white male.
That's right. No, not necessarily success. There are a lot of failures on the road in the past, but I think we are learning. There are new tools available for marketers, for brands, and these tools are now available to actually micro-segment and micro-target these customers a lot better.
It seems to me that car companies have been enormously successful at doing this over the years. If you look at the way, if you just watch Univision or Telemundo, for example, and you look at the marketing of the same vehicle there compared to, let's say, English-speaking mainstream channels, if you will, they seem to have been getting it right over the years, haven't they?
Cars are a particular kind of product with very distinctive needs between Hispanic consumers and non-Hispanic consumers, and also within the Hispanic community, younger and more older consumers, if you will. And therefore, it's relatively easier in those markets that is a very physical, a durable and tangible product than a service, a mobile phone service, or a content producer such as Univision.
Is the mobile service, the service that they're developing, and this goes to a bigger question, different than the product that they're selling elsewhere? Meaning, are they marketing the same product a different way, or is it a different product to a new community?
The only way T-Mobile and Univision will be successful that they produce a very tailored new brand promise that is specifically targeted. Knowing T-Mobile, I bet you that they will produce a very tailored product between content and the various packages they will offer. So it must be extremely tailored.
How do marketers get ahead? We have about 40 seconds left. How do marketers get ahead and see the demographic shifts out there and try to take advantage of something before it comes to fruition? If people had seen the Latino market explode 20, 30 years ago, some companies would be way ahead.
Yes, companies are way ahead. Again, as I said earlier, consumers leave a lot of traces these days. We can map consumers. Consumers draw a map to their doors, and we, as marketers, need to identify those maps. And from those maps,
that's very interesting. Consumers tell you how to get here. You just need to be able to read them.
Exactly.
Okay, Erich Joachimsthaler, thank you so much.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Tomorrow on Arise Exchange, we'll explore the controversy surrounding the firing of former executive editor of the New York Times, Jill Abramson, making news all weekend long. Let's take a look at the numbers. The market finishing up in choppy trading, up 20 points for the Dow Jones Industrial Average to 16.5. The S&P and the NASDAQ also both up. Thanks for watching. I'm Andrew Schmertz. We'll see you again tomorrow here on Arise Exchange. Have a good evening, everybody.